Meghan Markle arrived on the set of Good Morning America with the grace and poise that had become her hallmark since stepping into the global spotlight. Dressed in a crisp white blouse and tailored slacks, she smiled politely as she was introduced by George Stephanopoulos, who maintained a professional tone while welcoming her to the morning broadcast. The purpose of her visit was to discuss her latest initiative aimed at empowering women through education and entrepreneurship. For the first few minutes, the conversation remained light and inspirational. Meghan spoke passionately about her work, the stories of the women she'd met, and her commitment to creating systemic change. But George, as ever, was prepared to dig deeper. "You speak about empowerment and transparency," he said, "but many critics have questioned the transparency of your own narrative, especially regarding your time with the royal family." Meghan's expression froze momentarily. "I've always spoken my truth," she replied calmly. George leaned in slightly. "But isn't truth more complex than one perspective?" The shift in tone was immediate and unmistakable. George continued, referencing Meghan's past interviews, including the explosive sit-down with Oprah Winfrey. "You made serious claims or schism, mental health neglect, and being silenced. Yet you chose not to name individuals. Doesn't that allow the public to fill in the blanks unfairly?" Meghan's voice was steady, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "We weren't there to vilify individuals. We were there to highlight a pattern of behavior that affected our well-being." George nodded, then added, "But if accountability is important, shouldn't it be applied to everyone, including you?" Meghan smiled tightly. "I've taken accountability where appropriate, but we also deserve to protect our boundaries." George didn't let up. "But critics say you've built a public brand on claims you've never fully substantiated. Is that fair to those you've criticized?" Meghan's tone sharpened. "I didn't ask for the chaos that followed. I only wanted to tell my story." George fired back, but telling that story while declining to answer direct questions has led many to doubt parts of it. The studio atmosphere had cooled noticeably. Meghan's posture stiffened as she prepared for the next round. Segment shifted into Meghan's post-royal life. George brought up the lucrative deals with Netflix, Spotify, and publishers. "Some argue that you left royal duties under the pretense of seeking privacy," he said. "Yet you've launched several public ventures centered around your personal story. Is that not contradictory?" Meghan's expression hardened. "We left for freedom and safety. That doesn't mean we gave up our voice." George nodded, then pressed, "But when you leverage your royal association while criticizing the monarchy, isn't that selectively using the system?" Meghan replied curtly, "We're using our experiences to fuel change, not for personal gain." George followed up, "But critics and even some former staff have described you as difficult, controlling, even opportunistic." Meghan visibly recoiled. "Those labels are used too often to silence strong women," George countered. "Or are they being used here to deflect legitimate criticism?" The audience watched silently as Meghan's eyes narrowed, and she gave a measured smile that masked brewing frustration. The tension between journalistic challenge and personal attack hung thick in the air. George then brought up Meghan's political advocacy, especially her calls for paid family leave and civic engagement. "You've advocated for causes, written letters to Congress, and urged political involvement," he said. "Some believe that blurs the line for someone still using a royal title." Meghan nodded. "I'm an American citizen. I have every right to be involved in the democratic process." George replied, "But do you see how using the Duchess of Sussex title in these contexts can be seen as influence rooted in monarchy, not merit?" Meghan exhaled slowly. "I've worked hard my entire life. My advocacy doesn't rest on a title," George continued. "Still, the optics matter. When critics see you using the platform given by royalty to push political views, they question authenticity." Meghan's voice sharpened. "Would you say that to any other woman? In advocacy? Or is it only an issue when it's me?" George paused briefly, then answered, "It's an issue when access and privilege are used to sway public policy without accountability." The conversation had moved far from diplomacy and into open ideological conflict. By the fifth segment, the interview had become a tug-of-war between intention and perception. George asked, "Do you believe your narrative has overshadowed the causes you claim to support?" Meghan replied instantly, "If it has, it's because the media continues to focus on me instead of the work." George pressed, "But when? Your projects are released with royal branding, titles, and exclusive content about your personal life. How do you expect the public to separate the two?" Meghan's voice cracked slightly but remained composed. "We're more than headlines and titles. We're building something lasting," George countered. "But when documentaries become self-reflective and memoirs focus more on palace intrigue, then solutions, people wonder, is this advocacy or image management?" Meghan bristled. "Telling our story is not managing an image, it's reclaiming it." George nodded slowly. "And are you prepared for the fact that some people don't buy that?" Meghan's jaw clenched, and she gave a clipped. "They don't have to. I'm not here to convince everyone." The response drew scattered applause, but also a subtle unease among viewers. The tension was now unmistakable. George shifted to Meghan's public criticism of the royal press operation. "You've described a machine designed to control you, yet others within the family continue their duties without complaint. Do you believe your treatment was unique?" Meghan responded. "I believe the system targets those who don't conform," George replied. "Or is it that those who resist structure are uncomfortable with accountability?" Meghan leaned forward, visibly emotional. "I was accountable every day, even when I was being attacked relentlessly."
Ow.
George's tone remained calm but piercing. "But some reports, even from your own staff, say your version of events isn't entirely accurate. Have you considered that your truth may not be the whole truth?" Meghan looked away briefly before answering. "I've considered everything, and I still know what I lived through," George responded. "But the public doesn't just want feelings, they want facts." Meghan stared at him for a moment before replying, "Feelings are facts when they define your daily experience." The crowd reacted with a mix of sympathy and skepticism. At this point, Meghan's discomfort was obvious. George then asked, "What is it you want the world to see when they look at Meghan Markle today?" Meghan paused, choosing her words carefully. "Someone who stood up for herself, someone who didn't let fear define her life." George nodded. "If standing up involves burning bridges?" Meghan's tone was sharper. "Then the bridge wasn't worth walking across in the first place." George leaned in. "But you've left behind a nation, a family, and millions who once saw you as a symbol of hope. Does that weigh on you at all?" Meghan's voice faltered. "For the first time, it does. But I can't carry the world's expectations and still survive." George let the silence linger. "Survival is admirable, but some say you've weaponized victimhood to deflect criticism. Your thoughts?" Meghan's eyes widened. "That's offensive. I've shared trauma to help others, not to gain sympathy." George raised an eyebrow. "But it's brought sympathy, fame, and financial success. Can you acknowledge that?" Meghan didn't answer immediately. The tension had reached its peak. Suddenly, Meghan removed her earpiece. "I agreed to an interview, not a cross-examination." George looked unfazed. "We're just asking questions the public wants answered." Meghan stood up. "And I've answered them repeatedly, but people like you don't actually listen. You just wait to twist the next sentence." George gestured calmly. "You're on national television. These are the moments where clarity matters." Meghan stepped away from her seat. "I'm not staying where I'm not respected." The live broadcast scrambled to cut to a commercial. But not before viewers witnessed Meghan walking off the set, visibly upset. The host left behind tried to smooth over the moment with neutral commentary, but the damage was done. Within seconds, social media platforms were ablaze with reactions. Hashtags like Meghan storms out and GMA clash trended globally. Viewers debated whether George had gone too far, or whether Meghan's reaction proved she couldn't handle real scrutiny. Either way, the moment had already etched itself into the Morning News Hall of Fame, hours after the incident. Meghan's spokesperson released a statement condemning the interview as a staged ambush masquerading as journalism. ABC defended the segment, stating that all questions were shared in advance and agreed upon by both parties. Insiders later revealed that Meghan's team had attempted to prevent questions about the royal family and her media projects. But the show's producers insisted on editorial independence. As the internet debated what really happened, commentators from across the spectrum weighed in. Some praised George for asking the tough questions, others avoided, while others accused him of trying to humiliate a woman of color on live television. Meghan's allies came to her defense, saying the incident proved once again how media platforms are used to control narratives. Meanwhile, George remained silent publicly, but reportedly stood by his handling of the interview, believing it was fair and necessary.